Now, I want to talk in a bit more detail about the Christian comic community. In my last video, I went into a couple of rants about the issues I had with some of the comics I reviewed. But looking back, I should have phrased my issues better, so let's talk about the Christian comics community in a bit more sophisticated way. But first, I need to establish what I define as a quote-unquote Christian comic, or the Christian entertainment as a whole. Now, what I will define as a Christian comic is a comic created by a Christian. And no, I am not talking about if a Christian artist worked on a book written by a Buddhist that it would be considered a Christian comic book. No, I'm mainly talking about the writer, since most Christian writers usually have their faith bleed into their stories, like C.S. Lewis for example. Now with that out of the way, let's dive into the video. In my last video, I may have came off as someone who just hates most Christian media, but believe it or not, there were certain aspects I liked in some of the books I reviewed. For example, in the third book I reviewed, I think having a guy who can see demons is an interesting concept, and it could definitely work really well if the writer focused more on the character struggling to come to terms with his new power he has. Maybe he puts a blindfold because he's too afraid to see the horrible creatures in this world, or something to cement the fear that he would be seeing demons for the first time. But anyways, the point I want to get to is that there's probably a lot of people who enjoy these comics that the Christian community has created, and I'm not here to diminish your enjoyment of these books whatsoever. If you enjoy them, that is great. I imagine these books are doing well as it is, but I think the Christian comics genre can do even better, so let me explain. Now, let me preface this part by saying I've never printed my own comic, and have never completed a full comic. But I'm extremely passionate about storytelling and have studied a lot about what makes a good story. So you can take what you will with the points I'm about to bring up, as this is simply my opinion. So most Christian comics you have probably seen are adaptations of books from the Bible, or from missionaries throughout history. But there's a lesser known subsection of comics, and that's the fictional Christian comics, which I think has the most potential for growth. Now one of the things I would like to see is a bit more diversity in the type of stories being told. Right now, almost all the books I see people make are just in the superhero genre, and that's fine, but I feel like the superhero genre is probably going to continue to decline as the Marvel movies lose their steam. And also, having a wider range of stories is the best way to attract more people, which is the reason why manga is gaining in popularity with the younger generations, like myself. They have a story for almost anyone, and I would love to see more sci-fi comics done by Christian creators. And no, I do not count Dominion as a fictional sci-fi comic. It falls more into the adaptation genre, since it seems like they are just using the same plotline from the Bible. Okay, so I'm an avid believer in the idea there is no bad ideas for stories. There's only bad execution, and manga is a great example of this. With stories like Komi Can't Communicate, where a high school girl wants to make 100 friends and must get over her extreme social anxiety in order for her to achieve her goals. Or One Punch Man, where the hero Saitama wants to feel the thrill of fighting once more, but unfortunately he is able to defeat his opponents with one punch. Now, execution of concepts is very important when crafting an original story, and I think it's something that we could definitely improve on. Like I said in the beginning, they have some pretty interesting concepts, it's just the execution is almost the same for most books I've read. They mostly run with the concept of having a guy go fight demons, and when they execute the story, they don't really go as far as just saying, the superhero is a Christian, therefore he must go and fight demons because, well, they are demons, why not? It's like back in the day, if you wanted a bad guy, but you didn't want to explain their motives, you would just add a Nazi. But this is where execution comes into play. Instead of just saying, a hero is a Christian, as such, he must go fight demons. Maybe explore why he fights demons, or what makes him qualified to take on such a task. Here's an example of my idea for a Christian comic I would like to do sometime in the future while using the concept of guy fights demons. Instead of having just a normal human fight demons, how about we change our main character from a regular human to being part Nephilim? And right away, this opens the door to many possibilities, since him being a human-angel hybrid automatically condemns him to a cursed bloodline. And what I would do is have our main character make a deal with God to destroy the devil's strongest warrior to atone for the sins of his ancestors. And with that, we have an original story. Using the same concept and in the hands of a good writer, it can open up to some pretty deep conversations about salvation and what it takes for someone who cannot be washed by the blood, non-human specifically, to do the right thing and actually work for his salvation. Which now leads into my final and most important segment. Us as creators desperately need to put the most care into when crafting a story, and that's character and character development. Now, having good characters is the backbone to any good story. If you have interesting concepts but a bland character, then the story suffers and the reader will most likely drop the book. And the issue I see most Christian creators fall into is they put the message over the characters, to the point where the character turns into a mouthpiece for the author, or even worse, stops the plot of the story to talk about the gospel, which sometimes just messes up the pacing for the readers. Now this part is where I could get the most flack if I don't explain my stance on this subject properly. So, if you didn't see my last video, I am a Christian, so I'm not completely against the messages they are trying to push. I believe you can incorporate the gospel into your story, but just like concept of the story, it all comes down to execution. If you want people to talk about Jesus, then it should make sense when it's brought up in the story, as well as it's feeling natural and in line with the characters we follow. And you could probably bring up the fact that, well, the main character is a Christian, therefore it makes sense he would want to share his faith all the time. Again, execution matters. Let's take this as an example. Say you have a group of people hiding in a secret base, and one of the characters there is a Christian, and you have the base get stormed, and the only way out is through the front door. And the Christian character stands in front of the door saying, "None of you are leaving unless I know you have accepted Jesus." That is bad execution. It comes off clunky and makes your character look like a jerk. Instead, you should have a moment before the action, where you can have your character talk to someone in the base who might be afraid to die, and ask your character why he's so calm, and you could have him share the gospel. There are so many ways to do it. It's all about the execution and being smart with your writing. Now, let's get back to writing characters. The major pitfalls I see many creators fall into is that they make their heroes too perfect, to the point where they never seem to struggle with anything, and the only reason they seem to do what they are doing is because they are a Christian. And that's not how we should write our characters. Your character should try to come off as a real person, so you have to add flaws to your character. Maybe they have anger issues, maybe they're a bit cocky, and like to jump into battles without thinking. Even small details, like having your character pick up a piece of trash the person in front of him failed to toss in the bin, can already show your readers that your character is considerate of people around him. Another thing to do is to challenge your characters. Give them a situation that makes it hard for them to do the right thing. Like in the anime Fullmetal Alchemist, when the Elric brothers finally figure out how to make a Philosopher's Stone, they are presented with a dilemma. Since they find out the only way to make a Philosopher's Stone is to use living human souls as the main ingredient. And since they need the stone to get their original bodies back, our heroes are faced with a decision. Either go with their original plan to use the stone to restore their bodies, or find another way. To quote Hirohiko Araki, the creator of the famous JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, he says, "There may be nothing more beautiful than a person who pursues something important, regardless of society's approval, and even if it means standing alone. The best heroes are like Jesus Christ. They may be praised by some, but they act not for personal gain and risk death in desolation and solitude. They follow the call of truth within themselves. Those are the heroes." Unquote. Your characters shouldn't be given power just because of their faith. They should put the work in to achieve their goals and have them push past their limits to become a stronger person in the end. In conclusion, the reason I wanted to make this video is because I look at the state of the type of stories we are getting and the lack of morality and hope we get from the West these days. To the point that a lot of the younger generations are starting to look toward Japan because they produce good stories and have better role models for young people to aspire to. And I see many Christians chastising people for reading manga, but the question I have for them is, what is your solution? Just have them stop watching or reading altogether? Of course not. Young people right now are desperate for traditional stories about good and evil, and are well written and have characters that people can look up to. And we have a golden opportunity to provide today's youth to become better people and give them stories that they will take with them for generations. Instead, we play it safe, doing the same stories over and over and over again, with most of them becoming forgettable in the next week. Like seriously, how many football stories do we need? Where's the cricket stories? This video's intention is not meant to sow discourse between each other. I'm just a normal dude who wants to see good stories being produced, and I just wanted to share my thoughts on what we could do to make our work better. Anyways, let me know your thoughts on this and whether you want me to cover more Christian comics in the future. Also, if you have one that you think approaches this standard, let me know and I'll do a review sharing my thoughts. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!